In the quiet corridors of the United Earth Orbital Command, Captain Dale Mitchell stood alone, staring at the flickering screen before him. The message had arrived just minutes ago, transmitted through a dying relay near the outer rim of known space. It was short, broken by static, but its meaning was clear enough to chill his blood. The Cavor Alliance had activated the Silence Protocol. Humanity was no longer welcome in the galaxy. Dale had heard rumors of the Silence Protocol during his early years as a deep space liaison. It was an ancient galactic law, rarely invoked, reserved only for species deemed too dangerous to coexist with the rest of civilization. It did not call for war or negotiation. It called for erasure, total and irreversible removal from all star systems, trade routes, and data networks. Once enacted, no ship bearing human DNA would be allowed to dock, refuel, or even transmit a signal without being targeted for immediate destruction. He turned away from the screen and walked slowly down the dimly lit hallway. Outside the reinforced viewport, Earth hung in the blackness like a fragile blue jewel. Cities glowed along its night side, unaware that their species had just been sentenced to exile. Billions of lives, entire cultures, generations of history, all now considered a hazard by beings who had watched humanity from a distance for centuries. Dale remembered the incident at Helios 9. It had started as a routine quantum entanglement experiment, meant to test faster-than-light communication. But something went wrong. A containment breach tore open a micro-wormhole that pulsed with chaotic energy for 17 seconds before collapsing. The damage was invisible to the naked eye, but sensors detected ripples in local space-time that spread outward like cracks in glass. Alien observers called it the fracture event. To them, it proved humanity could not be trusted with advanced science. They saw not curiosity but recklessness, not ambition but arrogance. Back on Earth, the public was told it was a minor anomaly, quickly contained. Only a handful of officials and scientists knew the truth. And now, that truth had come back to haunt them all. In a secure briefing room 2 levels below, Dr. Lisa Garrett sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had been summoned an hour ago, along with a dozen other specialists from the Deep Space Coalition. The room was cold, the air stale. On the table before them lay a single data chip, the last transmission from Helios 9's science team before comms went dark. Lisa had spent the last 12 years studying alien languages. She could read the harmonic syntax of the Zenthari, parse the light-pulse dialects of the Viral, and even interpret the scent-based scripts of the Mycelian envoys. Her work had always been about connection, about building bridges between species that saw the universe in wildly different ways. Now those bridges were burning. "They're not giving us a chance to explain," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Colonel Hank Peters, the Coalition's chief of external affairs, shook his head. "There's nothing to explain." To them, the fracture event confirmed what they always suspected. "We're unstable, unpredictable, a walking anomaly." "We're also the only species that's ever apologized for its mistakes," Lisa replied, her eyes sharp with frustration. "That has to count for something," Hank gave a tired smile. "Not when your mistake unravels the fabric of local spacetime." The truth was, the Galactic Council had debated humanity's fate for months. Some factions argued for containment, others for observation. But the Cavor, rigid, ancient, and deeply conservative, had pushed hard for the Silence Protocol. And with their influence over the Council, they'd won. Dale entered the room then, his expression unreadable. He nodded to Hank, then looked at Lisa. "You've been assigned to the Odyssey," he said simply. Lisa blinked. "The Ark ship? But it's still in dry dock. It's not even fully crewed." "It will be," Dale said. "We have 6 weeks. Maybe less. The Cavor fleet is already mobilizing. Neutral systems are shutting their ports to us. We're being cut off piece by piece." The Odyssey was humanity's last-ditch project, conceived decades ago during the first wave of interstellar expansion. It was never meant to launch. It was a symbol, a backup plan in case of planetary catastrophe. Over 5 kilometers long, it carried cryovaults for genetic material, hydroponic farms capable of feeding thousands, and enough data cores to store the sum of human knowledge. But it was designed for a few hundred scientists and engineers, not an entire civilization. "Who gets to go?" Lisa asked, her voice tight. Dale didn't answer right away. He looked out the small window at the curve of Earth below. "Not enough," he finally said. In the days that followed, chaos simmered just beneath the surface of order. Evacuation protocols were activated in secret. Priority lists were drawn up. Scientists, engineers, medical personnel, artists, teachers. Children under 12. No politicians. No billionaires. No exceptions. The United Earth government broadcast calm reassurances about routine deep space drills, while cargo shuttles began ferrying supplies to the Odyssey's orbiting berth. On Mars, colonists received coded alerts. On Titan, researchers packed what they could. Families were separated without warning. Some chose to stay, refusing to abandon their homes. Others fought for a seat they knew they'd never get. Dale spent his nights walking the empty decks of the Odyssey, checking systems, reviewing manifests, trying not to think about his daughter, Emma, who lived in Seattle with her mother. She was 16, too old for the child priority list, too young to be left behind. He had begged Hank to add her name. The answer was no. The quotas were absolute. Lisa, meanwhile, worked tirelessly in the ship's Xenocom lab. She uploaded every translation matrix she'd ever built, every cultural archive, every recorded human voice she could find. She included lullabies, protest songs, stand-up comedy routines, and recordings of rain on rooftops. If humanity was to vanish from the galaxy, she wanted the Odyssey to carry not just its data but its soul. One evening, as the ship's skeleton crew ran diagnostics on the main drive, Dale found Lisa on the observation deck. She was watching Earth, her reflection ghostly against the glass. "Do you think they'll remember us?" she asked. "Who?" Dale said, "The others. The aliens. The ones who didn't vote for this." Dale was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Maybe not. But that doesn't mean we stop being who we are." Lisa nodded. Outside, a transport shuttle streaked toward the Odyssey, its lights blinking like a heartbeat against the dark. They both knew time was running out. The Cavor fleet would arrive within weeks, and when they did, there would be no second chances, no appeals, no turning back. Humanity's last ship was almost ready, and Earth, unaware, kept turning. The Odyssey hung in orbit like a sleeping giant, its hull still scarred from rushed construction and last-minute welds. Inside, the air smelled of ozone, hot metal, and the sharp tang of fear. 6 weeks had passed since the silence protocol was declared, and the ship was no longer a dream. It was a lifeboat, packed far beyond its limits. Over 2 million people now lived in its corridors, bays, and repurposed cargo holds. Every square meter had been claimed. Hammocks swung from ceiling rails in engineering. Classrooms doubled as sleeping quarters. The hydroponic farms ran 24 hours a day, their green glow a small comfort in the steel maze. Carl Benson wiped sweat from his brow as he tightened a bolt on a jury-rigged air recycler. He was a senior systems engineer, once in charge of maintenance on a lunar mining station. Now he oversaw life support for an entire floating city. His hands moved fast, but his mind kept drifting to his younger brother, left behind on Ceres. They'd spoken once right after the evacuation order. His brother had laughed it off. "You go. I'll be fine." But Carl knew better. No one left behind would be fine. Nearby, Nina Ortega ran a flight simulation in the navigation hub. Her fingers danced across the console, testing jump coordinates for the void, the uncharted space beyond the galaxy's edge. She'd flown supply runs to the Kuiper Belt and scout missions near Proxima Centauri. But this was different. There were no maps out there. No beacons. No rescue if they got lost. She had to trust math, instinct, and the faint hope that empty space was safer than a galaxy that wanted them gone. Dale Mitchell moved through the ship like a ghost, checking on crew, listening to whispers in the mess halls, watching children draw pictures of Earth on recycled paper. He no longer wore his captain's uniform. It felt too formal for what they were now, a tribe in exile. He spent most of his time in the command center, reviewing departure protocols. The final shuttle from Titan had docked 3 days ago. The last transmission from Earth had been cut off mid-sentence. They were alone. Lisa Garrett worked in the Cultural Archive, a cramped room lined with data drives and old-fashioned hard copies, books, photographs, handwritten letters donated by evacuees. She had insisted on keeping physical records. "Data can corrupt," she'd told Dale. But paper lasts. She sorted through a box of family photos, each one a tiny window into a life that might never be remembered. A birthday party, a wedding, a dog sleeping on a porch. She filed them carefully into climate-controlled cases, her hands steady even as her eyes burned. Outside, the stars watched in silence. The day before launch, a riot broke out in Sector 7. A group of evacuees from Europa claimed they'd been promised berths near the medical bay for their sick relatives, but found themselves crammed into a storage bay with no ventilation. Tempers flared. Fists were thrown. Security responded, but not before 3 people were injured. Dale went down himself, not with guards, but with a voice calm enough to cut through the noise. "We're all scared," he said, standing in the middle of the crowd. "But if we turn on each other, we've already lost." The room fell quiet. Someone started crying. Dale stayed until the last person had been relocated to a better space, even if it meant moving his own quarters to make room. That night, he stood on the main observation deck with Lisa. Earth was no longer visible, not even as a dot. They were too far out now past the moon's orbit, drifting toward the jump point. "Do you think they'll ever forgive us for leaving?" Lisa asked. "We didn't leave by choice," Dale said. "But maybe someday someone out there will understand." The launch sequence began at 0400 ship time. Alarms chimed softly. No blaring sirens, just gentle tones to avoid panic. Families held each other. Engineers ran final checks. Pilots strapped into their seats. Nina sat in the primary navigation chair, her breath slow and even. Carl monitored the core from engineering, his fingers hovering over the emergency shutoff just in case. Dale stood on the bridge, his hand resting on the arm of the captain's chair. He didn't sit, not yet. He activated the ship-wide comm. "This is Captain Mitchell," he said, his voice steady. "In a few minutes we will make the jump to the void. We are leaving the galaxy not because we want to, but because we must. We carry with us the best of who we are, our kindness, our curiosity, our music, our mistakes. We do not know what lies ahead. But we go together, and that is enough." A murmur of agreement rippled through the ship. Not cheers, not tears, just quiet resolve. Nina input the final coordinates. The quantum drive hummed to life, building a field of warped space around the Odyssey. Outside, the stars stretched into lines, then vanished. For a moment, there was nothing, no light, no sound, no time. Then, with a soft shudder, the ship reappeared in deep interstellar space, far beyond the reach of any known system. Silence filled the bridge. "Jump successful," Nina said, her voice barely above a whisper. Dale finally sat down. He looked at the blank view screen where no planets, no stars, no signs of civilization appeared, just black, endless and pure. In the weeks that followed, routines formed. Shifts rotated. Meals were served in shifts. Children attended school in the cargo bay, learning history from teachers who had once taught in Chicago or Cape Town. Lisa began recording oral histories, stories from farmers, pilots, poets, and street vendors. Carl fixed leaks, rerouted power, and taught teenagers how to repair circuits. Nina plotted course corrections based on faint cosmic background radiation, the only guide they had. But the weight of what they'd lost pressed down on everyone. Some cried in private. Others grew quiet, speaking only when necessary. A few refused to leave their quarters, staring at photos of loved ones they'd never see again. One evening, a young boy named Leo, no older than 8, approached Dale in the corridor. He held a small hand-drawn map of the solar system. "Will we ever go back?" he asked. Dale knelt, meeting the boy's eyes. "Not in our lifetime," he said gently. "But maybe your grandchildren will, or theirs. The galaxy is big, but it's not forever." Leo nodded, then tucked the map into his pocket and walked away. Dale watched him go, then turned toward the nearest viewport. Far behind them, if one could look hard enough, the Milky Way glowed like a distant campfire. Warm, familiar, and close to them now. They were adrift, but they were alive. And as long as they remembered who they were, humanity wasn't truly gone. It was just elsewhere. 3 months into the voyage, the Odyssey drifted through a stretch of space so empty it felt like the universe had forgotten them. The stars were faint smudges, too distant to guide or comfort. Inside the ship, the initial rush of survival had faded, replaced by a slow, grinding weariness. Routine still held, but smiles were rarer now. Meals were eaten in silence. The hydroponic farms produced enough food, but nothing tasted like home. Even the recycled air carried a stale edge, as if hope itself was running thin. Dale Mitchell noticed it most in the eyes of the children. They no longer asked about Earth. They drew pictures of the ship's corridors instead of oceans and trees. Some had started calling the Odyssey the world. It broke something in him every time he heard it. Then, on a quiet shift in deep monitoring, a signal appeared. It was faint, almost lost in the cosmic background noise. but it pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't natural. Nina Ortega spotted it first. She flagged it immediately and called Dale to the bridge. "It's repeating every 43 seconds, she said, her fingers hovering over the analysis panel. Narrow bandwidth, encrypted but not with any human code. Dale leaned over her shoulder. Could it be a distress call? Maybe. But it's coming from a dead zone. No star systems within 50 light years. They debated ignoring it. Resources were tight. Fuel was precious. Every course change cost time they couldn't afford to lose. But Lisa Garrett, when consulted, argued they had to investigate. "If it's alien," she said, "it might be a chance to understand why they cast us out. If it's human, we can't leave anyone behind," Dale agreed. The Odyssey adjusted course, its massive engines groaning as they redirected thrust. 2 days later, they found the source. A derelict vessel no bigger than a freighter tumbling slowly near the gravitational shadow of a dead star. Its hull was scorched, its engines dark. No life signs registered. A small team suited up, Dale, Lisa, Carl, and 2 security officers. They boarded through a ruptured airlock, their helmet lights cutting through the gloom. The interior was frozen, littered with debris. Control panels were shattered. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows. In the command chamber, they found the crew. 3 Kavor, tall, armored beings with smooth, obsidian-like skin, slumped in their seats, long dead. Their suits had failed. Oxygen had run out. But their ship's core memory was still active. Barely. Carl worked quickly to stabilize the power feed while Lisa connected a data siphon to the main terminal. The system resisted at first, recognizing her as non-Kavor. But after a few tense minutes, it yielded. Files began to download. Logs, sensor readings, personal entries. Back aboard the Odyssey, Lisa spent days decoding the data. The Kavor language was complex, built on layered harmonics and mathematical logic. But she had studied fragments of it years ago during early contact attempts. Slowly, the story emerged. The scout ship, named the Silent Watcher, had been monitoring Helios 9 before the fracture event. Its logs showed confusion at first, then alarm. But what surprised Lisa most were the private entries from the ship's science officer, a being named Krell. In one entry, translated with difficulty, Krell wrote, "The humans did not intend harm. They reached too far, too fast, like young birds leaping before they can fly. But their error was not malice. It was hope." Another log, dated just days before the silence protocol was enacted, read, "The Council fears what they do not understand. Humanity creates art in the middle of war. They heal enemies. They sing to their young while their cities burn. Such chaos cannot be controlled, and so they must be removed." Lisa sat back stunned. It wasn't that humanity had broken the galaxy. It was that they had threatened to change it. She brought the findings to Dale. He read the translations in silence, his face unreadable. Then he said, "They're afraid of us." "Not of our weapons," Lisa replied. "Of our hearts." The revelation spread quietly through the ship. It didn't fix anything. It didn't bring back Earth or fill the empty berths, but it changed how people saw themselves. They weren't monsters. They weren't mistakes. They were something the galaxy found too wild to contain. Still, danger remained. The Kevor didn't leave wreckage unattended. If this scout ship had been sent to observe, others might be watching. Dale ordered the Odyssey to erase all traces of their visit. They left the Silent Watcher drifting, its secrets now shared with the only species that might truly understand them. But the encounter left a mark. In the mess halls, people talked more. A musician played an old folk song on a salvaged guitar. A group of teenagers started a mural on a blank bulkhead, painting constellations from memory. Lisa began teaching basic Kavor phrases to volunteers, not for diplomacy, but for remembrance. One night, Dale found her in the archive, staring at a photo of a Kavor child, recovered from the scout ship's personal files. It looked almost human, with large eyes and a curious tilt to its head. "They have families too," she said softly. "Then why exile us?" Dale asked. "Because they can't imagine a galaxy that holds both order and chaos," she answered. "And we are chaos with a conscience." Weeks passed. The Odyssey pressed deeper into the void. Systems failed more often now. A water reclaimer broke down, forcing rationing for 3 days. A minor fire in Storage Bay 4 caused panic but no injuries. Through it all, the crew held together, not because they were heroes, but because they had no other choice. Then, during a routine scan, Nina picked up something else. A faint energy signature far ahead. Not a ship. Not a star. Something else. It pulsed in a pattern that matched no known phenomenon. Dale gathered his team. Could it be another trap? Or another message, Lisa said. They didn't know. But for the first time in months, the ship felt less like a tomb and more like a vessel again, moving toward something, not just away. As the Odyssey changed course once more, Dale stood on the bridge watching the empty view screen. Somewhere out there, the galaxy had judged them and found them wanting. But out here, beyond its laws and fears, humanity still breathed, still wondered, still reached, and that, he thought, was worth protecting. The Odyssey approached the edge of known space like a traveler nearing the end of a long road. Ahead lay the true void, the vast empty gulf between galaxies where no starlight reached and no signal echoed. But before they could cross that final threshold, they had to pass through the rimward corridor, a narrow stretch of space still claimed by the Galactic Council, and there, waiting in perfect formation, was the Kavor Armada. Over 200 warships, sleek and black as obsidian, hung in silent array. Their weapons were powered. Their shields glowed faintly. They did not fire. They did not move. They simply blocked the path. Dale Mitchell stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back. Alarms had not sounded. There was no need. Everyone on the Odyssey knew what this meant. Nina Ortega sat at navigation, her face pale but calm. Carl Benson had already rerouted power to the shields, though they knew it wouldn't matter. The Odyssey was a city on the move, not a warship. One shot from the Kavor fleet would tear it apart. A transmission crackled over the comm. The voice was deep, resonant, translated through the ship's Xenolink. Human vessel Odyssey, you are in violation of Silence Protocol Directive 7. Power down your engines. Prepare for boarding and quarantine. Dale recognized the voice. It was Admiral Torvak, the same Kavor who had argued most fiercely for humanity's removal during the council hearings. His tone held no anger, only cold certainty. We are not turning back, Dale said into the mic. His voice was steady, though his heart pounded. Then you will be destroyed, Torvak replied. Your species has proven incapable of restraint. We will not risk the stability of the galaxy for your sentiment. Lisa Garrett entered the bridge then, holding a data pad. She had been working non-stop since they detected the fleet. Her eyes were tired but bright with purpose. Don't fight them, she said to Dale. Send them a message. What kind of message? Nina asked. Not words, not data. Something they can't ignore. She explained her idea quickly. Using the cultural archive, she had compiled a single transmission, less than 3 minutes long. It began with the sound of rain on leaves, then a child's laugh, a violin playing an old Irish tune, a recording of a grandmother telling a bedtime story. Images followed. A sunrise over the Pacific, a field of sunflowers, hands planting seeds, people dancing in the street during a festival, a doctor holding a newborn baby. It ended with a simple phrase spoken in over 50 human languages. We mean no harm. They see us as chaos, Lisa said, so let them see the beauty in it. Dale hesitated. It felt foolish, hopeless. But he remembered Krell's logs, the Kavor science officer who had seen humanity differently. Maybe not all of them were blind. Do it, he said. Lisa uploaded the file and broadcast it on all open frequencies. Kavor, Zenthari, Mycelian, even the old human emergency bands. The transmission pulsed out into the void, a tiny ripple of sound and light against the silence. For a long moment, nothing happened. The Kavor ships remained still. Torvak did not respond. Then slowly, the lead vessel powered down its forward cannons. One by one, the other ships followed. Their weapon signatures faded from the Odyssey's sensors. Dale held his breath. Torvak's voice returned, quieter now. You send us songs, while we point guns at your heart. Why? Because we still believe you can hear, Lisa answered, stepping to the comm herself. A pause. Longer this time. When Torvak spoke again, his tone had changed. Not warm but thoughtful. Your species creates meaning where none should exist. You mourn strangers. You build gardens in war zones. You forgive those who hurt you. Such behavior is illogical and dangerous. Dangerous to whom? Lisa asked. To order, to predictability, to the peace we have built over 10,000 cycles. Peace isn't the absence of chaos, Lisa said gently. It's the balance between many truths. Another silence. Then Torvak said, go. Cross the rim. Enter the void. And do not return. The Kavor fleet parted like a curtain, opening a clear path ahead. No threats. No conditions. Just a single command spoken not with force but with something close to sorrow. Dale gave the order to proceed. The Odyssey moved forward, slow and steady, passing between the warships like a pilgrim walking through a temple of stone. No one cheered. No one spoke. They simply watched as the black ships fell behind, shrinking into the distance. Once they were clear, Nina let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Carl slumped in relief, muttering a quiet thank you to no one in particular. Lisa stayed at the comm, her eyes closed as if listening for an echo of the message they'd sent. Dale turned to her. Do you think it changed anything? Maybe not for them, she said. But it reminded us who we are. In the days that followed, a strange calm settled over the ship. People walked with their heads a little higher. Conversations returned to the mess halls. A group of teenagers started a choir, practicing old songs in the recreation bay. Lisa began collecting new recordings, voices from the Odyssey itself. A baby's first cry, a welder humming while he worked, a poem written by a girl who missed the smell of grass. They were no longer just running. They were carrying something worth keeping alive. Dale spent more time with the younger crew members, teaching them navigation basics, telling stories about Earth that weren't sad. He even started writing letters to his daughter, knowing she'd never read them but needing to say the words anyway. One evening, he found Lisa on the observation deck again. The Milky Way was now just a faint smear of light behind them, like a memory fading at dawn. They let us go, he said. Not because they trusted us, she replied, but because they feared what we might become if we stayed. And what's that? Something they couldn't control. Something that might ask them to change. Dale nodded. Out here, beyond laws and borders, humanity was free to be messy, kind, flawed, and brave all at once. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The Odyssey sailed on, its lights a small defiance in the endless dark. The Odyssey drifted through the void, farther from the galaxy than any human had ever gone. Stars no longer dotted the sky. There was only blackness, deep and quiet, broken only by the soft hum of the ship's systems. Years had passed since they left the rim. Children who had been toddlers at launch now walked the corridors as teenagers, their voices echoing in halls that had once belonged to strangers. They had never seen rain, never felt wind, never touched soil, but they knew Earth through stories, through songs, through the careful hands of those who remembered. Dale Mitchell was older now. His hair had gone gray, and he walked with a slight limp from an old injury. He no longer wore the title of captain. That role had passed to Nina Ortega, who now guided the ship with the same quiet strength she'd shown since the beginning. Dale spent his days teaching navigation to the young, tending a small herb garden in Hydroponics Bay 3, and writing in a worn notebook filled with memories he refused to lose. Lisa Garrett still worked in the archive, though it had grown far beyond its original walls. What began as a storage room for data drives had become a living museum. Children came to listen to recordings of ocean waves, to touch preserved leaves from ancient forests, to watch films of cities that no longer existed. Lisa taught them not just history, but meaning. We are not defined by where we came from, she often said, but by what we choose to carry forward. Life aboard the Odyssey had settled into a new rhythm. Not the frantic pace of escape, but the steady pulse of survival turned into something like home. Gardens flourished under artificial suns. Artists painted murals on bulkheads using pigments made from recycled materials. Musicians played instruments built from spare parts. A school operated in what was once a cargo hold, its curriculum blending science, ethics, and the arts. They had no planets to claim, but they had each other. Carl Benson, now head of ship maintenance, trained a new generation of engineers. Many of them had been born on the Odyssey, and to them the ship wasn't a vessel. It was the world. Carl didn't correct them. Instead, he taught them to respect every bolt, every wire, every breath of air the systems provided. This ship is alive, he'd say, and so are we. One day, a young girl named Maya approached Dale in the garden. She held a small plant in her hands, its leaves bright green. I grew this from a seed in the vault, she said proudly. It's a tomato, Dale smiled. Your great-grandparents used to eat these fresh from the vine. What's a vine? She asked. He paused, then knelt beside her. A vine is a plant that climbs toward the sun. It needs earth, rain, and time, but it also needs someone to care for it. Maya looked at her tomato plant, then at the artificial lights above. We don't have sun or rain, but we have time, and we care. Dale nodded. That was enough. Years turned into decades. The original crew aged. Some passed away, their ashes scattered into the void in quiet ceremonies. Others lived to see grandchildren born in the heart of the ship they had saved. New traditions formed. On the anniversary of their departure, the entire ship fell silent for 1 minute. A moment to remember those left behind, and to honor the choice they had all made to keep going. Nina, as captain, made the difficult decision to shut down non-essential systems to conserve power. Entertainment decks were repurposed into classrooms. Luxury quarters became medical bays, but she never touched the archive, the gardens, or the music hall. Those are not luxuries, she told her council. They are why we are still human. One evening, Lisa played an old recording over the ship's public address system, a simple piano piece composed centuries ago on Earth. People stopped what they were doing. In kitchens, workshops, and sleeping quarters, they listened. Some cried. Others held hands. For a few minutes, the Odyssey felt less like a machine and more like a single breathing being. Dale stood on the observation deck, watching the endless dark. He thought of Emma, his daughter, who would be long gone by now. He hoped she had lived a full life. He hoped she had known love. He hoped somehow she had understood why he left. He never got an answer, but he had made peace with the silence. As the decades stretched on, the Odyssey changed. New modules were built from salvaged parts. Children invented games using zero-gravity corridors. Poets wrote verses about stars they had never seen but dreamed of every night. They had no destination, yet they were not lost. They were becoming something new, a people shaped by exile but not defined by it. One day, sensors picked up a faint anomaly far ahead, a cluster of hydrogen clouds, swirling in a pattern that suggested gravitational influence from something massive but invisible. It wasn't a star. It wasn't a black hole. It was unknown. Nina called a meeting. Some argued to avoid it. Others said they had nothing to lose. In the end, they voted to investigate, not out of hope for a new home, but out of curiosity, the same trait that had once frightened the galaxy. As the Odyssey adjusted course, Dale stood beside Lisa on the bridge. They were both old now, their steps slow, their voices soft, but their eyes still held the same fire. "Do you think we'll find something out there?" he asked. "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe we'll just keep going." And that's all right too. Because they had learned something the galaxy never understood. Humanity was not about place. It was about people. About kindness in the dark. About singing when there was no one to hear. About planting seeds even when you might never see them grow. The Odyssey sailed on, a tiny light in the endless night, too late to fix what was broken behind them, but never too late to begin again.